folks, welcome back to the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and thanks so much for joining me on this episode. This is perhaps one of the hottest topics that I have spoken on since the beginning of my time as a speaker over 20 years ago. Seed starting, I think that each and every person has a natural desire to be a part of seed starting because, y'all, it is really a miracle when you think about it, right? I mean, it is a miracle. You take that little teeny hard speck of something, and when you give it what it needs, it grows into amazing vegetation, plants that bloom and flower and give us fruit and food and vegetables. And I mean, it is really pretty amazing, right? Well, I think we're all naturally drawn to do that, but few of us step back and take a moment to figure out, all right, I want to do this. There's got to be like requirements of what that seed needs, which are pretty simple most of the time. They just jump in, and that leads to failure most often. I often would tell the story when I was speaking that the very first time I ever spoke, I totally undervalued the seed starting information. I was just given an overview talk to a group of people that in fact had gardeners. They just wanted to hear about what a flower farmer does. That was a novelty to them, and it still is to this day to people, right? But when I mentioned that I seed start and this is how I do it with soil blocking and, I don't have a greenhouse, I do it all in this little room, half the room's hands went up. They were so interested. And what I learned that day, friends, is that so many people want to start seeds, but have thrown in the towel long ago because they're simply they don't have the basic ground rules to follow, so they failed. Anyway, that became one of my niches early on in my career, was just helping people with the simple basics. Y'all, I'm not talking about complex. I'm not talking about needing a greenhouse. I'm talking about just the simple steps of giving the majority of seeds what they need to sprout so you can be successful. Because what I also find is most people think the easiest, most successful way to start seeds is planting seeds out in the garden. And that is the case with a few seeds. But in general, I have found that the majority of seeds are easier and simpler to grow when we start them indoors. So I did a series several years ago that was called Seed Starting Saturday. You can find the entire series on YouTube to watch the videos, but the audio of at least the first two versions, first 2 weeks, has so much information. And I'll be totally honest, we were going to redo the Seed Starting Saturday series. But when I sat down to listen to what I had reviewed back those years ago, I thought, this information is the same today as it was yesterday, and it will be tomorrow. And so what I have for you today, friends, is the audio, a great portion of that first week where I'm talking about what seeds are we talking about starting, about how I value making the lists of what I want to grow, but not filling in that famous calendar that I talk about all the time that literally runs my farm. Figuring out that there's two different types of annual seeds, the way that I talk about seeds. There's warm weather and there's cool weather. Which are the seeds that you want to start? How far in advance do you start? So friends, let's take a listen to this audio to kind of jumpstart you in the seed starting season. Hi there. Welcome to week 1 of Seed Starting Saturday. My name is Lisa Mason Ziegler. And if you haven't already done so, down below this video, you can sign up to have these weekly videos dropped into your mailbox. So don't forget to do that. This week, We are really at the very beginning stages of the seed starting season. So this week is for me, because this is what we're doing. Y'all are walking along with what I'm doing here on the farm. And this is the week that I start making the first of many lists. I start listing all the different seeds that I want to start. I'm not writing on a calendar yet. I'm simply making a list of those things that maybe I've grown in the past, those things that I've learned about in the last season that I'll be growing for the first time this year. I'm just making this general list. And so once you start working on that list, the really important step that you need to take next, which is where I think a lot of people get really, really confused, is you've got to figure out, first off, I didn't say this at the beginning, but we're talking about starting annual seeds. These are seeds that we plant every year, tomatoes and zinnias and things that don't live out in your garden year after year. So we're talking about annuals. So the big thing you need to wrap your head around is that for the purposes of this seed starting sessions, there are two types of annuals. There are cool season hardy annuals. Those are seeds that thrive in cool to cold conditions. And then there are warm season tender annuals. Those are annuals that like it warm. Think tomatoes and sunflowers. So the first really important key piece of information you need to know about each one of the seeds that you want to start is which one of those are they? Are they a cool season hardy annual or a warm season tender annual? Okay, so there's several different ways that you can go about learning that information. Unfortunately, there's not one place that you can find all good things about everything. So I'll recommend first to you, you can go to our website store to the seeds, and under seeds there is a cool season and a warm season category. It has flowers and vegetables. Those are the flowers and vegetables that we start, that we also happen to sell the seeds. And we have listed them according to this information. So that would be a good place to start. You might be able to check off a lot of the seeds on your list by learning which way they go. So that is a key piece of information. And once you start gathering that, the other thing you want to the other piece of information you want to notate while you're gathering that information is what is the recommended lead time for that seed. That means how many weeks in advance of when it's going to be planted do you start the seed. For instance, let's take tomatoes. Most often, most of the seed packets say start 6 to 8 weeks before it's time to plant. We're going to talk about when's the right time to plant later. We're right now trying to figure out the lead time and whether it's a hardy or a warm season annual. So while you're gathering information, you're trying to learn, is it a cool season hardy annual or a warm season tender annual? And then how much time is recommended that you start the seed in advance of when it's going to be started. Those pieces of information are going to be key as to when you actually start your seeds. So let's just say you've got your list, you know which family your seed falls into, cool season, warm season. And for most of us, the cool season is what we're going to get busy starting in the next 3 weeks. The warm season, it's still too early for those. And we're going to know how many weeks in advance of planting those seeds we need to start them. So the next really important step that you're going to take is finding out, when do you plant cool season hardy annuals in your area, and when do you plant warm season tender annuals? As a general guideline that I follow is we plant cool season hardy annuals 6 to 8 weeks before our last spring frost. For us, I'm in southeastern Virginia, zone 7. Our last frost is typically mid-April. I count back 6 to 8 weeks from mid-April to find when I should be planting transplants and or seeds directly in the garden. So for me, I'm doing the math in my head as I'm staring at this. You'd think I would know these things all by heart by now, but I don't. But that puts me back to Valentine's Day to March 1st, if I'm calculating correctly. That means that I can have transplants ready to go out in the garden, or of those things that prefer to have their seeds planted out, the seed can be planted in the garden. So the key piece of information you need to learn is, when is your last expected frost date? Cool season stuff, in general, there's certainly always rules that can be broken or wiggle space, but 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date is when cool season hardy annuals are planted. So when do you plant warm season stuff? Well, there's wiggle room on this too, but this is what we follow here on the farm. So again, my last expected frost is mid-April. So if I have transplants to go out in the garden, we typically plan to plant them out in the garden almost on that target date or within a week. Sometimes it doesn't always cooperate, but we do things to warm the soil, like using black film. So I would say to you, if you're not going to be doing things to warm the soil, like putting down black film, that the sun really heats it up, then I would wait 2 weeks after your last expected spring frost to plant warm season tender annuals out in the garden. If I was going to plant seeds out in the garden directly, for those things that will let you do that, I'd wait 2 to 4 weeks after that last frost date, because if the soil is not warm, warm season annuals will not sprout very well at all. So the takeaway today is to start making a list of the seeds that you want to start. Then you have to learn, is it a cool season hardy annual or a warm season tender annual, right? Then how far in advance is the lead time that you need to start that seed? And just a note here for all of you that are soil blocking in general cuts off about 1/3 of the growing time, because it's not in a container and it gets so much oxygen to the roots, they just tend to grow faster. Plus, you plant them when they're a little smaller. So just write down what the recommendation that you find is, and if you're a soil blocker, you'll cut 1/3 of that time off. So I have to look at my list to make sure I'm covering everything. So make your list, find out what type of annual it is, and then what is the lead time. I'm not going to go in depth about writing on the calendar, but I want to show you the calendar. This is my seed starting calendar. This is an at-a-glance jumbo. See how big each square is? It gives me a lot of space to write stuff, and you can find these online. We don't sell them. So you might want to gather up that. So next week we'll talk more about actually transferring that information that you've gathered onto this calendar. And of course, other seeds, it never fails. The week that we look to check your seed stock to see what you need to order, the minute you start opening seed catalogs, you find more seeds to add to your list, but there's always room to add that. So I hope you're going to join me next Saturday. We'll get down to writing on the calendar, gathering the equipment that we need for successful seed starting. Successful, y'all, for me means quicker, faster, easier. So I hope you're going to join me. Sign up down below if you haven't already done so. And please share our videos and our emails on social media. That's what really helps us. If you like it, comment on it, and share it is what really helps us. So I appreciate it, and we'll see you here next week.
Well, I hope that was
a little informative information for you. I'm going to put several links down below this. I'm going to link you to the YouTube series on our website, or actually to the videos on our website. And I'm going to link a couple other pieces of information that just will be helpful, of things that were mentioned. And friends, I'll see you same time next week on Saturday morning, and to have the next step in the seed starting season version of 2022, of what we had several years ago, with my additional comments. And friends, because I believe that everybody can start seeds. We just have to take a step back and figure out a few little ground rules that will help you for the rest of your gardening life, and make it simple. And it doesn't matter if you're starting in a little room like I do. Even through all this commercial growing, I've never had a green or a hoop house. I'm in the middle of the city. It's not really an option. So friends, you can make lemonade out of lemons just like we've done. So folks, check out thegardenersworkshop.com, where you'll find all the resources and the equipment that you need to be a stellar, successful seed starter. Ciao.